Every day, we throw away waste and then forget it ever existed. But what if the person across the table from you had spent years making sure that away actually meant something? Today's guest is Shobha Raghavan, CEO of Sah Zero Waste. Shobha was a systems analyst in the corporate tech world. What changed her path? A composting experiment in her own home. And from that small, muddy beginning came a career that now touches thousands of tons of waste, hundreds of livelihoods, and some of the biggest companies and apartment communities across India. They are making sure that waste management is smarter, fairer, and importantly, more human. This is a conversation about what's possible with India's waste and how a bold career shift was actually a calling that became a career. Shobha, welcome to Positive Planet.
Yes, thank you.
Very excited to talk to you. So, for the uninformed, could you take us through about Saha Zero Waste?
So, Saha Zero Waste was set up as a social enterprise 13 years back. We had a very strong vision and mission that we wanted to solve the waste problem through a circular economy approach.
So, this circular economy, at least a couple of years ago, I did not understand what circular economy. Most viewers of this podcast also may not understand what actually is circular economy because so can you elaborate on what is circular economy?
Whatever we wear, whatever we consume, you see, either it has come from nature and it has to go back to nature. So let's say whatever food we eat, we are getting from nature, and whatever waste we are generating out of our eating habits have to go through a process, and it has to go back and regenerate nature. That is one workflow of circular economy. Another workflow is the inorganic materials. For example, let's say plastic bottles that we are using. It has come from mining the earth. So it's some form of petrol that has got processed, and it has become a plastic bottle. Now, this plastic, there has been so much engineering that's happened to make that a food grade plastic bottle. So it has met all kind of FSSAI standards for ensuring it is food grade. Now, the quality of the material is so good that it has to be preserved. So, if that plastic could be recycled with good quality, it can go back into a bottle-to-bottle recycling, which means that much more you do not have to go to the earth and mine.
Okay.
So, if you start seeing reports, there is more aluminium above the earth than below the earth. So, you can imagine our consumption patterns and our recycling patterns. Okay. So, circular economy is about how do we close the loop back with respect to the materials. It also is a design problem, circular economy. While we're talking about materials that can be recycled, we also need to see that how does the manufacturing companies design their materials so that they can be reused, they can be used till the longest period of time, and when it is end of life, it can be recycled.
If we look at the entire waste, what percentage of it is effectively done through circular economy?
There's one thing lacking in the circular economy definition, which is that informal and formal waste, right? So in India, there's a lot of informal culture of recycling, which is very harmful to both people and planet.
Informal meaning?
When I say informal, if you just put heat to plastic, it is going to melt. Right? You don't need a factory for doing that. So these are informal practices that are being followed by the, I would say, illegal systems that exist now in India. In effect, what is happening, the fumes during the heating are being consumed by those people, which is very toxic. Quality of material that you're going to get through that process is going to be very low grade.
Is it one of those I've seen in videos? They break down these gunny bags into small pellets, they burn it, and then they extract some threads and then finally make it into a chair.
Exactly. So, as long as it is in a very controlled process where emissions are under control and people are wearing protective gear, it's fine. But when it goes into these shanty areas where it is done informally, that's where the problem is.
Yeah, that's the videos I think I have seen.
Those are the informal ones. They don't have any registration. They don't have any... They have no responsibility. They discharge into the environment.
So, but we wouldn't know if I'm buying a chair that is coming from such an informal setup.
You would not know. But that is where today brands are supposed to show traceability of their materials. If this cup is being made, a brand has to say that this has been responsibly sourced. So it is upstream. That is a manufacturing process responsibility. Similarly, manufacturer also now needs to say that when this goes end of life, it is again going responsibly into a recycling. When both of them are done, upstream and downstream, and everything is traceable, that becomes true circular economy.
So, when did sustainability happen to you? Have you always been in sustainability?
I have not always been in sustainability. My career started as a electrical engineer in Kirloskar, but then I moved into IT when the IT phenomenon happened, and it was not a great stint for me. It means I stayed there for some time, but I didn't like to do an IT job. But I realized that whatever happens happens for good, because today, if you do not have everything is controlled by IT. If you do not have that knowledge, then you will not be able to drive IT inside your organization or within yourself. After that stint, I took a 10-year break actually when my son was born. And I didn't know I was going to take 10 years. I thought I'll take 1 year, 2 year, 3 year and etc. But it just happened 10 year. I enjoyed that part of life also. I was between 30 and 40 at that time. And when I decided to get back to work, I was wondering which is the field I want to work. I did not want to go into mainstream. I googled for. I remember I used the word alternate. Sahas came as the first link over there, and they said something about waste. So I met Wilma, and we were at our first office in Jayanagar. She was telling me that she had set up the NGO, and she's now intending to start a private limited. We were in a phase where she had set up a LLP, and just for a few months as a transition. And she said, would you like to join? We're just going to start the organization.
So, prior to 2013, Sahas existed, but as an NGO.
As an NGO. So 2000 the NGO was formed, and today it's 25 years. So what triggered me to say okay to Wilma on waste was in 2012 September, the Karnataka High Court had given an order against a PIL. The PIL was put up by a set of villagers at the landfill site at Bangalore. And the Karnataka High Court passed an order that segregation at source is a must. That order came to my apartment. So we tried to understand what this was, and it was a no-brainer. It is just segregate your waste. That's all. It was your food waste and your dry waste and your sandy waste. So we went and knocked at every door and said, see, this is all what you need to do. Within 3 months, we were able to actually educate the entire community and say you need to segregate your waste at source.
How big is the community?
We are 200 households. Just after I finished this engagement and it became a process, that's when I said, okay. And I decided to take up a job. So when I met Wilma and she talked about waste, it clicked. And it said, oh, okay, this is a problem we need to solve. She also had just an NGO background, but she had that vision that she wants to create it as a service, because waste is a 365-day issue, and she wanted to bring out some service model around it.
Do you see room for more people to come into this sustainability space? Do you encourage, do you invite people to be part of this?
At least 10 years back when I joined this space, I thought of it as an alternate industry to be in. But today it's a mainstream industry, sustainability. It's no more a soft industry. It means this space of sustainability means infrastructure, process, economics, thinking about nature and people. For someone who wants to enter the space of sustainability, just start. Don't think too much. Just start. Start in some way. Start as an intern. Start talking to companies who are working in this space. If you have to just focus on waste management, understand what's happening to your waste, be on the ground, visit a landfill.
Does it also provide good career opportunities, good salary, good avenues, good progress, good growth?
I would say yes, and I would say no. Okay. Yes, because career is not only about a salary slip. Career is also about how much lived experiences you take from your work life. How much of real life problems are you solving? And I can guarantee you that experience you'll get over here. Now we come to salaries. We have all been in the corporate sector, and we have moved to this sector. I would like all my employees to get a salary as fair as the corporate sector, if my bottom line supports. And that is the organization we are trying to build. And that is going to come only if our customers pay that salary, right? So we would really like our customers to pay more, because there is a lot of work that has to happen. Waste has a cost to it, and we have to be proportionally paid. If that is paid, then all our employees also will be having enhanced salaries.
I think corporates all should not look at this as an expense. They should look at this as a responsibility.
It is a responsibility only. So when that is being considered and they believe that they want to showcase waste as an experience center, as a learning center, as a real-time problem being solved, obviously they will start paying towards it. And we do have such customers who are paying that way, but we want everyone to do it. And there are no discussions about this.
So is Sahas NGO still cruising along with the Sahas for profit, and how's the journey of these two entities together?
The vision of the two companies is the same. Zero waste is in the center of the vision and through circular economy. Sahas NGO works with largely with the CSR funds and to set up pilot models to engage with the municipality, do capacity building for them, set up infrastructure and processes, and do a lot on awareness with the citizens. And after the tenure of the CSR projects, they generally hand over this entire project either to the municipality or to some entrepreneur. Whereas the private limited, when it was set up as a social enterprise, again, I'll just define what a social enterprise because not many people are aware what social enterprise is. There is a business enterprise, there's a social enterprise. Both are registered under the same act in India, under the Private Limited Act. But a business enterprise obviously needs to know to have its top line and bottom line increasing. Whereas for us, it is a triple bottom line. Triple bottom line is people and planet before profit. Right? So there is a cost towards environment and there's a cost towards using people the right way. After all those costs are met, it's our profit. So for us, impact matters a lot, and we are one company that measures our impact. For us, all three parts are important. We have a scorecard that measures our social impact. How many people are we able to give direct employment? How many people are we able to give indirect employment through our partnership?
What's that number for Sahas now? Direct and indirect employment.
So direct employment is 400 plus.
400 people you're employing?
Yes, we have employed 400 plus people. And secondly, indirect is close to 2,000. Second impact that we measure is environment. For us, we measure resource recovery. Resource recovery definition is how much of waste do you send for recycling. So our score over last so many years has been in the range 91 to 98%. That means we consciously ensure waste is not sent for co-processing. And third impact is, of course, a financial scorecard. We have to be self-sustaining. We are a company that is invested in, and our investors are impact investors. So one shift we are trying to bring in the space of social enterprise is that we would like to move it towards what we call as a steward ownership model, wherein the core employees of the organization have the power to take decisions, right? They are steering the organization towards a purpose. So these are the things that define us as a social enterprise, though we are registered as a private limited.
So if you started from zero, where are you now? Is there any quantifiable?
See, today we process 100 tons of waste per day.
What kind of waste is this?
It is municipal solid waste, which is your food waste and other dry waste that comes in your municipal streams, which is paper, plastic, cardboard, metal, tin, glass. We work with plastic waste. We work with electronic waste. We work with textile waste. And occasionally with construction and debris waste. Our very flagship vertical is actually what we call as a zero waste program, where we go into corporate or tech park campus and we make it completely zero waste. Always starts and ends with leadership. When the leadership is aligned, there is a policy that the company puts out that there's a zero waste, this is a zero waste campus, and you need to do so and so things.
Can you practically make a company zero waste?
We have more than 100 corporate sites where we have made zero waste. Zero waste does not mean you do not waste do not create waste. It just means zero waste to landfill. But zero waste to landfill is again a glory of the past. That's minimum that you should do. Above zero waste to landfill is what we call as waste to energy or co-processing, which will go to cement kilns. And even above that is what is the waste that goes for recycling. And even above that in the zero waste triangle is how much can you reuse. before you send for recycling. Even above that is how much can you reduce?
The
Right.
reduce the consumption itself.
Reduce consumption itself. So in this journey, when we work with our corporates, we analyze the data to see is there any contamination that is pushing the waste towards landfill or waste to energy. So we go and try to see at source why is this contamination happening, and whatever training needs to be done, we engage with them and train them. Secondly, a good example of reduce is actually tissues. So the washroom tissues can be replaced by hand dryers. So we just need to do a financial analysis of how many tissue rolls are you buying every day, month, year, and say this is the cost towards that, and look at the amount of waste you're creating in tissue and the cost towards waste management. The whole economics works in favor of the corporate, and they look at reduction, and then it's just about one-time infrastructure for hand dryers. So all of this can happen only when you collect data, analyze the data, and go back, close the loop, have a feedback mechanism, and engage with them.
So as a consumer, I go into a washroom like a hotel or a airport or wherever. So there is a tissue paper box and there is a hand dryer also. If I choose to use tissue paper, can I still justify my acts stating this will eventually be recycled anyway? So there is no harm in using it.
So that's what you need to push yourself hard to, because it's easy to pull a tissue paper and wipe your hand. But if you need to stand under the hand dryer for at least a few seconds and
Barely
wipe it.
10 seconds.
Barely 10 seconds. So powerful these hand dryers. So you need to make those conscious, hard choices.
What are the other kinds of waste that one can possibly think of that help us to be zero waste?
Let us say an employee drinks, let's say, 3 coffees or teas in a day, or drinks water. Now you have the paper cups that are being used. It's like a single-use disposable, right? You just enjoy your coffee, tea, and water for a few minutes, and you
Discard it.
If that is encouraged, that employees bring their own cups, or the companies just give some cups, and they are available in a central pantry where people can come, either wash your cups and keep it like we do at home, or just keep it and ensure that there's a housekeeping that will wash it. What happens is you're creating a culture that this is the cup that is available. There is no paper cup. These are reusable, and you are investing in a cutlery that is reusable. So can you imagine how much of paper cups can be reduced? Looking at this one stream of paper cups, you can see how much of reduction is possible.
Do you find that usually challenging to persuade them?
It used to be earlier, but I feel now there's a lot of awareness on that. And moment you bring the cost analysis on the table, the spark
Again
is on.
changes.
So just you need to tell them you are wasting so much money in creating buying paper cups and then making it waste and paying for the waste.
You said about 100 companies are practicing this zero waste to landfill, right?
Yeah.
There are thousands of companies in Bangalore. Why only 100?
So when we choose our partners, when I say partners, these are our clients, we would really like to see the partner is aligned towards the larger problem and is not only looking at compliance as a tick in the box. Someone who is driving the organization towards the circular economy, towards the commitments to SDGs, towards being a thought leader in his own industry. Such companies we would like to partner.
So there are still a lot of companies that are supposedly large conglomerates that have not subscribed to the idea of zero waste.
Not yet. Because
They are still there.
They're still there. The solid waste rules have got revised. And effective April 1st, 2026, there's a lot of scanner on bulk waste generators, which are nothing but corporates, residential communities, education institutes, hospitality. And they need to now understand the rules and need to ensure that they have the right infrastructure, process, and they're doing their waste management responsibly. Now there is no escape.
What would you tell, let's say, if all the viewers or some of the viewers of this podcast are companies who have 500,000 employees, but they have not taken that step towards zero waste?
We should not think zero waste is a project. Zero waste is a process. Today, it should be in your budget. And we are very happy that all our clients who are with us for so many years, a decade long, they have included that as a budget and they have realized that you cannot escape this budget.
And I don't think that budget is a lot, right? I'm sure it's
not.
like a very
It's not. It's such a small amount. But the fact is, there was no line item itself in the budget for waste management. So now adding that line item is hurting them. But it's a matter of time. It's just the first time. After that, it becomes a norm.
So, as a company, do you recycle or are you just a platform where you collect it and send to recyclers?
We are actually implementing organization, which means to say that the corporate, when we sign up with a campus, a bulk waste generator campus, apart from the engaging part and training to ensure segregated waste is coming and infrastructure is in place, we actually process, or we have our bottom of the pyramid who are actually working at the site. They log in at 9 and log out at 6 like another employee of the site. They actually sort the waste into different categories. And for whatever food waste is there, they either process it on site or it goes to an off-site partner based on the infrastructure. But in so many years, what we have built for the city are MRFs, which are material recovery facilities, because there is no so much space for sorting dry waste. Sorting dry waste actually is very voluminous and can actually occupy a lot of space. So what we have done is now we try to move the unsorted dry waste to our material recovery facility. And material recovery facilities are nothing but infrastructure where dry waste has to be processed. It has to be sorted into some 25-30 categories. It is actually sorting for circular economy. By sorting, we are preparing feedstock for the recyclers. So let's say a recycler who wants to take PET bottles looks up to us and says, give me X number of PET bottles every month. So anyone who's looking at, let us say, milk pouches is seeking our support to only segregate, sort milk pouches and give it to them.
I see a lot of these concerts happening, conclaves, and then so many events, right, are generating more waste than it would be otherwise. What's happening to all that event waste? Is there something Sahas wants to do? Are you already doing something in that?
So we do work with a lot of events. Like last 6-7 years, we've been managing the IPL in Bangalore. So one of the main problems with event waste is the mixed waste that will come, because it's a very short period of time. You're not going to be bothered about segregating your waste, but then you have to take that extra effort, put people to man the bins, and when they come and eat during that break time, you'll have to tell them very clearly that put the food waste here and put the dry waste here. Once you get segregated waste, then it becomes simpler. A second thing that has to happen is we have to look at reduce. You can't keep using disposable water bottles. So there are companies that have brought in actually reuse cups, and they have water dispensing stations, and they have also integrated washing systems. Another interesting thing around this is also the kind of exhibitions, public exhibitions that are happening, and they are all industry driven. And these exhibitions last for, let's say, 3 to 5 days. And during that exhibition, they set up huge stalls. Very large size stalls. We realized that it's a makeshift arrangement. You are building an entire, almost like a big office. But what happens is post the event, they bring the JCBs and just bring down all the wood. And that bulky wood with all the nail and paint and the laminate is not at all easy to handle. So we have to move towards stalls that are sustainable, which means you have aluminum structures that are there.
Reusable structures.
Reusable, just make it however fancy you want it. But you should not be using this amount of wood. It's not only about the waste generated when people come and attend the exhibition, which is much more easier to handle. That's not a problem. But the bulky waste coming out of the stall, dismantling itself has to be avoided.
Earlier, back in the day, once in a year, twice in a year, we used to buy new clothes. Now, I see like every day, Myntra or some other brand, fashion parcels coming home.
Yeah.
Where is it heading? What's happening?
It was fast food for some time that had created so much of the waste, because fast food was creating a lot of packaging waste. Now, added to that has become fast fashion, where you can buy more often. So, you are changing your wardrobe more often.
They're not changing, they're only adding.
They are adding, but they also need to remove, because they have limited space. When they remove, where do they dispose it? It is not only your municipal solid waste, your food waste, your bins that you have kept in the kitchen and your bathroom. The apartment also needs to have a system where textiles can be dropped. I need to have a place where I can come and drop my clothes. Then you need to tie up that collection to an organization like Sahas Zero Waste. We are having textile recovery facilities in both Bangalore and Gurgaon. Now, why did we establish? We are a company that has believed in circular economy even before circular economy started becoming a fashionable thing to do. So we have set up a TRF We may not yet be profitable on that unit as yet, but we set it up because we needed to create that behavior change in the community that please set up collection and disposal systems. Please let us know when your boxes are full, we'll collect it and we'll bring it to our textile facility. Our job is to sort it into different grades, whether it can be reusable, rewearable, what is the kind of material each cloth is. We've also invested in technology to understand and scan the material to see whether it's 100% cotton, it is blended with polyester, etc. Because the downstream market requires material of certain type. You cannot say your dress is 60% cotton, 20% polyester, 10% elastine, and expect the market to take it. They will not take it. They come with the specification saying, I want so much percentage of so-and-so material. Then you need to inventorize your material and say, this is my material with this kind of material composition. Go to a market and see who's going to buy this material.
Who's the market here? What happens when you say downstream? Where is it going?
It's recyclers or downcyclers or upcyclers. So certain material can be upcycled. That means I can make some products out of it.
Like some bags from jeans.
Denims is a good material for upcycling. All of that value addition is what we do in the TRF. And then we map it and say, okay, he's the denim guy. He will take jeans of this size, this color, this shade, this composition, and he will upcycle it. Now, when we set up a plant in Bangalore and Gurgaon, we thought we were close to two big textile hubs. One is Tirupur and one is Panipat. But we later realized that neither of these two textile hubs are taking post-consumer textile waste. Post-consumer is what we are wearing is post-consumer. Right. After my consumption, it's post-consumer. These two hubs were focusing on pre-consumer or what you call post-industrial. That is the what you call katrang that is coming out of the textile factories. So in making the shirt, there are cuts of certain size and color and fabric. It's a no-brainer. It comes in specific design and shapes and sizes, and it has its own value. It's a very good value waste. But post-consumer is where the whole dynamics is. And both Tirupur and Panipat were not taking it. And Panipat has been talking about it for a very long time that they take post-consumer waste. But they take post-consumer waste from the West and not from India.
Oh, so they are importing?
Yes, they are importing. Because the quality of post-consumer waste coming from outside the country is very good. And for them, you need a fabric of a particular quality to, again, build it back into a yarn.
So it is actually helping the West to dump their waste here, but not helping us?
Yes, it's not. You ask them, anything you ask them, they say, no, we cannot take this. So we were ahead of time as an organization to ensure that textile waste doesn't land up in landfill and it is going for some repurpose or reuse or downcycling. The entire thing is about behavior change. The consumer should build that system of safe disposal. They should be ready to pay for their collections and processing. Then the whole system becomes viable.
If I'm an individual watching this conversation, is there anything I can help to address this problem?
You first have to go back to your wardrobe. Be aware of what you have in your wardrobe. Do you need it? You do not need it. Look at your consumption and find out where do I need to give all the excess garments that I have. Give it in a responsible way. Today, this fast fashion has created all kinds of wearables, right? And Indian culture is such that we just tend to give everything to our housemates. But they are not ready to wear such fashionable clothes, right? And what happens is you're literally dumping it on them, okay? And because they have a relation with you, they have been working with you for a long time, they just take it. They just take those bags of clothes. When they take it home, obviously they cannot, this is not what they wear, right? So they just hand it out somewhere and it keeps just going, it gets lost, it gets dumped because it's not what they would want to wear. Rather, it would make more sense to send it to a responsible organization like us, like where we say that we will open it out to the market. We are having swap stores. Okay, whatever is reusable, and we put out our swap stores every Saturday. People who want to wear those clothes will buy it, rather than you dump it on someone who does not want to wear and who belongs to your family, extended family. So these are some cultural shifts that are required. Not to take our maids for granted that they will be wanting to wear your clothes.
In the entire recycling ecosystem, just curious to understand what happens to the soiled clothes. Where does it go?
So soiled clothes are the last grade of clothes when we do a sorting. They have to go to a waste to energy plant. But
So-
even a waste to energy plant will tell us to remove the disruptors.
Which
So
is
disruptors
dirt
are your
and all.
buttons,
okay.
zips, and such
Acha,
things
acha,
which
okay.
otherwise cannot be actually burnt in a waste to energy plant.
I see. So
So-
that also needs to be
Yes,
sorted or
that also,
processed.
yes, that's the value addition we do in the TRF. Each of these, only when people come and visit these facilities, they understand there's so much of process involved. So when we are asked very tough questions like, oh, you're making money out of the textile waste we are giving. We are not making money. We are creating a value out of the so-called garments that you do not want. We are opening a whole space, opening up all your clothes and giving it for different kinds of uses.
If I were to ask as a company, if I'm watching this conversation, what can I do? So that action, does it have something to do with EPR, what we keep hearing these days? That, I mean, I've heard about it more recently these days. Is the EPR, the word called EPR?
EPR is Extended Producer Responsibility, and it came way back in 2016. It came for plastics and then it came for e-waste, electronic waste. When EPR was initially implemented, it was plastics EPR is meant for those FMCG companies that are using plastic packaging in putting out their products. So every year they have to commit to so much of plastic that has been put out through their sales, and they have to ensure collection and channelization of that and proper recycling. Whereas EPR for electronic waste means that after electronic item reaches end of life, it is defined that a washing machine has a 8-year life, a mobile has a 3-year life, laptop has 5. It has been defined. When it has reached end of life, the electronic goes back for recycling. So initially when EPR for plastic and electronic waste was implemented, it was implemented with the right spirit that brands have to pay the cost of collection, recycling and formal operations. And therefore, whatever orders we would get for EPR, for plastic and e-waste management, industry would really get into the operations and see, let's say we got an order for 10,000 tons of washing machines. Where are you getting your washing machines from? Who are your informal sector partners? Who are your aggregators? What is the cost per kg? Are they using child labor? Everything was discussed, and we had to show evidence and documentation for that. And we would have the big fours of the auditors who would come and audit our supply chain. But in the last 2 years, EPR has gone to a scam.
Is it?
Yes, because it is now CPCB has now changed the process and made it more technology aligned, but it has actually boomeranged on us. Now the discussion is only about, can you give me so many credits to my wallet? Nothing is being checked. They have, in fact, a lot of companies I know have disbanded the EPR teams within their companies, because it's now a matter of just I'll pay you so much money, just transfer the money to the wallet. Secondly, EPR has now also got extended to other material streams. It covers sanitary waste, it covers paper waste, glass waste, which is actually good. So what is pending is, I think, EPR for textile waste. There's also EPR that has come for used cooking oil, for used oil from machines. All of that has come. But right now, the implementation of the rest of the EPR is also
Same fashion.
nothing has started as it. No one has even understood what is EPR for the rest of the materials, while plastic and e-waste are still struggling to get the right implementation in place.
So you said you're collecting about 100 tons of waste every day, and that is largely coming maybe from these bulk waste generators. What about the other waste? Where is it going? Bangalore generates about 6,000 tons of waste. So where's all the 5,900 tons going?
A city is divided into bulk waste and non-bulk waste. So the municipality needs to take care of the non-bulk waste, which is about 60% of the city's waste.
Non-bulk waste meaning coming from individual houses?
Yes, in individual houses, which are defined by number as less than 100 kg per day. The bulk have to have their own infrastructure, decentralized infrastructure, put up a composter or a gas plant for their food waste, have to have an infrastructure for garden waste, have to also have ensure that the dry waste is handed over to the right organization so that is not burnt or dumped and it goes into recovery mode.
Is it being implemented successfully?
Very weak.
Weak.
Very, very weak.
What's the reason?
The reason is because regulatory bodies really not checking on them.
Okay, so rules are there, but there is no penalty, there is no checking
Nothing. There is
mechanism.
no mechanism and there is no bandwidth with these institutions. I would say Bangalore has got a very sensitized community with respect to waste. But you have a lot of moving population in Bangalore, right? People from other cities are coming. So it's a continuous process. It's not a one-time activity. People have to follow it as a culture. It has to be part of the society's rules. It's all a process because it's a 365-day affair.
But where is the gap? So is the waste is not segregated, or the segregated waste is not being put to good
Yeah.
use?
It's
Where
both.
is the gap?
So there are older areas in Bangalore and then there are newer areas. So a lot of communities, I would say, are sensitized on segregation at source. If you newly move into an apartment, there will be a poster that says segregate your waste. To that extent, I think we are quite sensitized in Bangalore. But are they putting systems in place to check whether it's actually getting segregated, actually getting processed? Those are a question mark.
So today, if every resident of Bengaluru separates their waste, so do we have enough infrastructure to process wet waste and dry waste?
No, we don't. See, today waste is not a cleanliness problem. It's a systems issue, which means you do not have infrastructure, you don't have intent, you don't have process to do it, and you don't have people allocated to do it, and you don't have funds allocated to do it. So unless you solve all parts of the system, you're not going to bring that change, right? And are you paying for right amount for that waste? It has to be treated like a proper service. You cannot get your electricity without paying a bill. You have to pay a service fee that is a true cost. And the true cost is coming from the people's cost, all the other resources like transport and such thing, and the processing cost.
So let's say today we are at 20%. From 20%, we won't go to 100% overnight, right? Though the infrastructure is not ready, it will come. Can I be optimistic in that sense?
Let's take an example of Indore, which has been on the Swachh Sarvekshan rankings. They have been number one continuously now for 8 to 9 years.
Do they recycle 100% of their waste?
No. First is the fact that you go to anyone on the street, you take an auto, the auto wala will knows about segregation at source. They imbibed that behavior change very effectively. So everyone in Indore segregates their waste, which is a 50% of the problem. Then they put collection infrastructure such that only segregated waste is moving from one point to another point. They created that entire transfer station where all the food waste will be offloaded together, all the dry waste will be offloaded together. Then they created a centralized infrastructure where actually waste has to be sorted and can be recycled. Of course, one of the lack sides of the indoor model is that because there is no service fee paid by the municipality or it is not sufficient, they are just sending that waste to cement kiln. They're just shredding it and sending it to cement kiln. And if you see their report, only 30% of that is recycled. So if it's a different case that Indore, when it has established upstream 100% segregation, at downstream, it has not been able to recycle. You can easily recycle up to 90%.
Why is it not happening in Bangalore? Yaake Bangalore alli aagta illa?
Bangalore ಯಾಕೆ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಇಲ್ಲ ಅಂದ್ರೆ
Little bit
ಇಂಟೆಂಟ್ ಇಲ್ಲ. The government needs to push the citizens and start penalizing them. And we have such a big literate community in Bangalore and such a beautiful place. We are blessed with such good weather, very temperate weather, and I don't understand why we cannot segregate our waste.
If I am a citizen of Bangalore, what is it that I can
We
do?
need collective action and individual action both together. Every citizen
what
needs
is
to
an
do.
individual action?
They need to segregate their waste. They need to question their community what is happening to their waste. Similarly, corporates need to move out of their corporate campus and see what's happening to the waste given to informal sector. As a community, you have an individual role and you have a collective role. So as an association, you need to discuss waste. It's two sides of the same coin. If the individual residents do not push, the association becomes lax. In the case of a community, that's the individual and collective action. There is also an action that's required from the government, and that's the governance action. While we're talking of inside a community, there is a governance action, which can be private, but there's an entire governance action required by the government.
System level difference.
System level changes. Why are you not able to penalize those who are not segregating their waste? Very happy to showcase Gurgaon. They came last in the list of cities trying to make bylaws for solid waste. But they have now pulled up their socks. They have worked so closely on making a good RFP. And now they go knocking at the door of the bulk waste generators and ask them, why are you not segregating your waste? They have tightened. Of course, they generate about 1,100 tons and they have got a lot to do because they're lacking behind. But they've got it right. Even if they're late, they got it right. How much more are you going to protect your citizens and say, I'm a very cozy, nice, friendly government? It's both sides. Collective action is citizen and government is collective action. Inside the citizen community itself, there's collective action. Inside the government itself, for example, there's a pollution control board who has got responsibility. There is a municipality that has a responsibility. These two institutions do not have synergies.
So, as a realtor, I'm into real estate, so I see most of the projects that you're doing, these are all gated communities, 500, 1,000, 2,000. I have two questions. One, as a realtor, when we are designing these buildings or the communities, in terms of waste management, what can we do from a design level? And as residents of the community, what can they do?
So, as a builder, you have to ensure that the system you're building for waste collection and processing is already part of your design. You already have, as per SWM rules, 5% of the space has to be given for solid waste treatment. I'm not sure if 5% is now sufficient with the kind of per capita consumption that is happening. Maybe it has to be 10%. You have designed for the next 30 years, right? And the kind of generations that are going to come are only going to have more consumption and the kind of e-commerce that's happening. And the infrastructure has to be correct. It should not be that builder is moving out of the property in 3 years, handed over to the association, and therefore, I don't care, I'll just put some machine just for the sake of getting an NOC. And you have to ensure that the segregation at source and the collection processes are aligned. Just keep your 3 bins outside. That's it. And empower the housekeeping team to reject waste that is not segregated. Ensure that the collection system is such a way only segregated waste moves from the flows to the processing unit. And at the processing unit, you have to have the right manpower to actually process the waste.
So 3 meaning dry, wet and hazardous.
Dry, wet, sandy waste. And now with the new rules, there's a special care stream also, which is anything else beyond, which is like e-waste and other things that you generate on a episodic
that's the 4th
basis.
category.
That's your 4th category.
So is there any gated community that you know in Bangalore that is doing on-site composting?
Many are doing
wet
yes.
composting.
Many are doing on-site composting. I would give a lot of credit to Bangalore societies for doing on-site composting. But are they using 24-hour composters or traditional composters? Those are questionable. And just to give you a difference between a 24-hour composter and a traditional composter, what you're composting is actually food given by nature.
Right.
And if nature is growing to grow those vegetables in X amount of time, even for degrading that food, you need Y amount of time. You cannot do it in 24 hours. So obviously there is a manual intervention there which is not correct, because the output that you'll get in 24 hours will not be aligned to nature. It will not have the minerals and nutrition required for regenerating back nature.
What are those machines actually doing? I've seen these machines
They just
recently.
burn.
Okay.
They just burn.
So you can't call it a compost.
Technically, it has been CPCB approved as a composter, as a 24-hour composter, but it has been disastrous for the last 1 decade.
That brings me to ask one question that I ask in every podcast to all my guests. If every citizen of this city takes a decision to do it after watching this conversation, what is that one thing you'd like every one of us to do?
I think they have to be mindful of their consumption and mindful about the waste that they're generating. They should know that they are generating, what waste they're generating and how much waste they're generating. And they should know what is happening to their waste. If every citizen opens their mind to this, I think the level of awareness and the way they are going to question the municipality, they are going to question each other, and they're going to expect the city to deliver that kind of, it's going to be phenomenal.
Really enjoyed the conversation with
Thanks,
you.
JP. Thanks for those nice questions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks
so
for being here.
Sure.
And thank you for watching the podcast.